Hi everyone. Next session, let's welcome Cassie Crossley, working as a Vice President for Supply Chain and Security at Schneider Electric. She's author of the book Software Supply Chain Security, Securing the End-to-End Supply Chain for Software, Firmware, and Hardware. Today she will present the topic, The Missing Link, How We Collect and Leverage SBOMs. So she will explore Schneider Electric's approach to collecting and using SBOMs to improve vulnerability management. She will share insights from the Log4j and OpenSSL incidents, and she will provide key recommendations for enhancing SBOM practices. So please join me in welcoming Cassie Crossley. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I am going to share my screen, so one moment, and you will see my presentation. All right, great. So thank you so much for having me be here. First, let me tell you about Schneider Electric. You might not have heard the name. We are a global company headquartered in Paris, France. We are not a German company. We are a French company. And we have some products that you might recognize the brand names, such as Square D. They have a lot of low voltage and medium voltage products. We do a lot of smart meters, products such as that for both homes and businesses. So big green boxes outside of buildings can be Schneider Electric equipment. We have APC. You may remember the desktop UPSs that you would have, but also for data centers. That's mainly data center business. So a lot of what is securing your platforms, and also from a power standpoint, big three-phase UPSs and APC. And then Aviva, if you're using manufacturing, we have a lot of products from Schneider Electric, from PLCs, programmable logic controllers, but also Aviva for industrial automation software and different kinds of process automation products. Being a global company where we've got just hundreds of thousands of different activities going on. We have over 54,000 suppliers. We have over 150,000 employees. We have 200 manufacturing locations, 100 R&D locations. We're very distributed globally, as you can see on this picture. And in what we're doing today, when I go into the software bill of materials program, we are, I would not say just starting the journey when it comes to capturing suppliers' SBOMs, but if those that are working with the software bill of materials that I'll explain in a moment, that it is definitely I would say in the crawl phases for many suppliers on providing software bill of materials. So I'll be talking mainly about how we're doing it with the products that we're selling, but the same would be the case for your other suppliers, and really encouraging your suppliers or yourselves to be providing this information. So I'm going to talk, that's what I'm going to describe today. But first, let me show you just, I know it's hard to read all of the different activities of these, but our supply chain security initiative is made up of 13 plus initiatives. And overall, there's a life cycle, as we would normally see. And down on the bottom left in our research development design is our SBOM initiative that I lead. And I'm the overall supply chain security vice president. So I work with all of these different initiatives throughout our company, but the ones that primarily are where I'm focusing a lot of attention is on the product security side as a product security officer for the company, and the software bill of materials that I'll talk about today, but also the tie into vulnerability management and potentially, incident response, because that's where the capabilities of the software bill of materials, which really extend beyond just the R&D side, because the software bill of materials could essentially, it's a transversal topic. When you're looking at bringing in software bill of materials from other suppliers, and also providing them to my downstream customers. So it's all very important throughout the life cycle, but we're going to be focusing on the software bill of materials program that we have in place. So first, what is the software bill of materials? When I first would give presentation or talk about software bill of materials many years ago, it was not a word that most people had known. I believe that if you're probably attending this session, you now know what a software bill of materials is and why it's important for you to either be aware or producing or consuming those. But just as a picture, especially because there is hardware associated with a lot of our products, here's a picture of a pretend product, and that there are multiple layers to a software bill of materials or a list of what is in the product. And that could be commercial software components that we purchase from somebody. It could be the embedded operating system that is in products, such as like Apple has iOS, right? That's an embedded operating system. And that operating system can have other pieces, just like all of these could have upstream or what we call transitive dependencies, things that are in the product and the software components. It could have proprietary software, which is software that we create for our products. And it can have open source libraries. And I think we're all very familiar with open source libraries, and I'll talk more about those later. But that can all go into the software bill of materials. And this is suggesting that I may not know all of the items within a component. For example, I do not know or have the SBOM for the Microsoft.NET DLLs. I don't have them from Microsoft. For example, that binary, that compiled binary is a literal, closed box that I don't have visibility into all of it. So they could be using additional libraries that I might want to know in regards to risk. And just as with your suppliers, there are probably components and applications or things that you may not have the software bill of materials to know what's in there, or it may not be 100%, let's just say, filled out with all the knowns, because this is a sort of new providing this to other people. Like, what's the visibility? How are you constructing it? That's an interesting point that I'll talk about, how we went through it with our process and how we're doing it today at Schneider Electric. So overall, just a little bit of a history lesson. I am part of the Product Security and Cybersecurity Office. We were separated in two different groups when I first joined the Product Security Office after having been in the Cybersecurity Office. And I received a customer contract from electrical utility, and they were using a template that said, you must provide SBOMs. And I had heard that word from our vulnerability management team, and I went to them and I said, where do I find out more information? I went to the NTIA working groups at that time. It was before it moved into the US CISA working groups, and joined those. And I actually was the one that suggested, hey, we need an awareness group, because this is something that we need to get out there from a change management standpoint. So I participated in that and actually helped draft some of the language for the definition of what an SBOM is that went into the US Executive Order 14028, and then of course has now gone into the EU CRA, the Cyber Resilience Act, for what, providing an SBOM and such. And so I've been there, involved and deep into the SBOM journey for over 4 years, as a, both as a participant, but as a leader, and have been presenting on the topic. And because there's a lot of reasons to do it. As I mentioned, from a use case, we actually had these requirements from our customers. So from a procurement requirement from utilities, but also now it's not specifically mentioned in, for example, the US Secure Software Development Attestation Form, but it is mentioned in the Secure Software Development Framework. I definitely, it's going to be even more with the Cyber Resilience Act for the products that we sell into Europe, but it should be in my opinion, a requirement for any consumer, a business consumer that's taking in product onto their premises or into their environments, that they should be collecting the software bill of materials for each release that they have for a product that's that they are having to manage the risk for. So in regards to how we are doing software bill of materials, this is where I'll talk about our processes and where it came about. So back after it came out into the executive order, I changed the policy, being the product security officer who owned the secure development lifecycle. I changed the policy to say, this is now going to be a requirement as of January 2021. Every product that we release to our customers will have to provide an SBOM to my team or provide the binary of that product, and we would run it through scanning tools that can generate the SBOM. Now, out of scope was SaaS bombs, so software as a service, and I was waiting, and unfortunately the CISA working group that did the SaaS bomb, they don't really have a schema for software as a service for a bill of materials. But most of my products, the majority of them, over 90%, are either firmware application, firmware software that's on a product, a software application that's installed on premise at a customer site. It could be a mobile app. All of those you can produce SBOMs for. So there's very few products that are in our offer that I don't have SBOMs for, because they are, the SaaS products that get updated very frequently, can be changed every 5 minutes if you're familiar with the SaaS platforms. So what we've done is, as I showed, there's proprietary, third-party, and open source code. And so as a team, if they're providing me the software bill of materials, or if they're providing a binary, then we have brought those into a repository. At the beginning, we were using Box and SharePoint. And then I have I was the first customer to purchase a tool called Cybeats SBOM solution, where I can ingest all of those software bills of materials that were being produced out of, at that time, binary applications. So, we use Synopsys B2BA, but there are so many different scanning applications that now can produce SBOMs. And we have these SBOMs uploaded into the repository. And here are the main users that we have. And I'm going to be drilling into the CP CERT, which is our corporate CERT. So if you've purchased a Schneider product and it has a security disclosure regarding it, that initiative is led by our corporate CERT. They work with the product teams throughout. And we have 14,000 people in R&D, so quite an extensive R&D landscape of 4,000 developers, over 500 projects going on at a time. We've got 15,000 digital products. You can see the scale, very large. And so we needed to be able to quickly identify risk of software components, and that's what the CP CERT responsibility is. And now they have the capability, and I'll show you where they can search the SBOMs for that information. Also, for internal R&D teams, for example, we have reusable components. I think a lot of people do, where you want to know the information about that. What is it using? Is it, for example, it's not uncommon where if you have multiple software components in a product, it could have, for example, 4 different versions of OpenSSL, because different software components have utilized those versions of OpenSSL. So a single product could list multiple versions. And in some cases, you could harmonize. In other cases, if a third-party provided code used one version of OpenSSL, but yet our team used a different version in a component, is there a way to harmonize to reduce the footprint of it and for consistency in risk areas? So the software bill of materials gives that visibility that I'll show you a bit at the end when I show you some screen captures, but also direct customers, because from being able to provide this to electrical utilities, I didn't want to send machine readable Cyclone DX or SPDX JSON files through email. And so we have the ability with our portal where direct customers, we grant them access to just the products that they have as part of their inventory. And that allows us to give, a specific view to them. Indirect consumers are ones that, like asset management companies that I'm working with, and there is an API being developed that is for SBOMs, where I'll be able to provide that information of SBOMs to other systems for ingestion. And I'm looking forward to that so that I can have more indirect consumers be able to access that information. And so imagine in the world that you are in, you've got what's called third-party suppliers, but then they have upstream suppliers. So your third-party or tier 1 suppliers have tier 2, tier 3, tier X, or fourth party, fifth party, whichever word you use, that being able to collect that SBOM from those upstream suppliers, you don't want to just do, passing things over and over. Being able to have those software bill of materials machine readable, but also be able to get those quickly as there's updates is very important. And so let me talk about vulnerability management, what we do. And I think that this would resonate for anybody who's doing any kind of vulnerability management or risk analysis, is this picture. I've heard about the Log4j vulnerability. Do any of your products contain this open source software? So that's an exact, kind of question we received when the first two Log4j vulnerabilities that everybody probably remembers came out. So what happens is, in that time frame, actually, we were fortunate to have the software platform, the SBOM platform, already deployed. But what happens as just a process step is that we actually use Jira, and it's already connected to all of our vulnerability handlers at the product levels. And this request goes out to them to say, do you have this in your product? So it goes out to the multiple vulnerability management handlers around, or the identified people around on those product teams. And we issued what we call an impact analysis to say, you have to let us know whether or not, this product is affected and not affected. And then we create this list of products that we release out in a security disclosure. And not everybody would necessarily have something affected, right? These three say, oh, no, this isn't even the same kind of platform. It's not in our environment. We're not using Log4j. So this is how our impact assessment process works. And I'm going to show you how it's sped up by leveraging SBOMs. All right. And so with the SBOM, what they now do, and did at this time, but it was still at the beginning stages when Log4j came out, there were products that maybe had not even done a release that year since we initiated the collection. Plus, we did not have do a scan of the back catalog. And so we still go through the process of asking teams, are you affected? But what they could do is Log4j, and I'll show you in OpenSSL, where we're searching the SBOM database for SBOMs with that open source component. And then we're able to pinpoint and make sure that as quickly as possible, and we have internal SLAs, those teams are responding to have an answer to it. So not only are we able to say, okay, we have this huge portfolio of products and releases, but we have found, that specific library in this product. It never answers the question, is it affected or not? But it lets them know that they must have a response and that there is a risk that we need to alert our customers to as soon as possible. After Log4j, our first version of the security disclosure went out within 48 hours. And then I believe there's definitely more than a dozen updates that we've done that as more information has come out of products. Now, one of the interesting points, though, is I had a CISO ask me, well, why is it that you changed, this product from saying it wasn't impacted to impacted? And in that case, it was a third-party supplier who notified us, again, upstream dependencies, that they were affected by Log4j and that they needed to provide a patch. So there is information, those unknowns. Like, we did not have the visibility of the information from that supplier to know whether or not that product was affected. It wasn't in our proprietary code, but it was in an upstream component. And that's why, expanding and increasing the quality and visibility of SBOMs is very, very important as a continuous improvement item. Now, what are the reasons that we did this? And I've already talked about, you've seen the difference. We're able to, from a target standpoint, our targets have been to reduce the amount of time to identify a vulnerable component. And especially over the last almost 4 years, where we've been collecting all of the releases and the SBOMs, that reduction in time is greatly, I don't have the exact numbers and would not be able to provide them, but that target is really, being an important part and has helped. I can guarantee you that these SBOMs are vital for us to do quick and effective risk management and be able to prioritize where we put our resources and time so that we can focus on those that we can, make sure that those are the first that get attention. And also how much time it takes to complete this end-to-end cycle. So for example, what used to be more of, and I don't have a curve to show it, but used to be more of a standard, curve in the middle. There'd be a few that would respond right away, but most people were in the middle of the pack. And then you have, a tail at the end. Now everything is looking much more, the curve is to the left, where we've, shifted left. The majority of the answers are able to be responded to quickly. Again, it still takes the development team's time to absolutely confirm whether they're impacted or not affected. So affected or not affected, and then be able to plan their patch and give that information. But we have seen such a significant change. And by having to provide SBOMs, developers are more aware of what's going on in their product because they're evaluating it. So now I just wanted to show you some screen captures as an example before I take questions. So for example, in the Cybeats SBOM solution, you can see many of our different kinds of products in this software catalog. And it has some visibility that if I wanted to just look at products, if they had a known exploitable vulnerabilities, severity count, all of that's available. And so there's ways to sort and adjust for that. But what I wanted to show you here is this is an example of Log4j, and then these screen captures are old. But in the software bill of materials that we have captured, there are 120 results for Log4j and 221 for OpenSSL. And in this example, what I want to show you as the OpenSSL, there are many different versions of OpenSSL. You can even see that some of the SBOMs we've imported have an unknown version. And that means most likely the scanning tool did not identify a correct version, or if we had imported an SBOM, it could have had an unknown version. This is generally the scanning tool can't identify the specific version. But in this case, there are a couple vulnerabilities in a set of products, low and medium vulnerabilities, that are using this OpenSSL 1.1v. So if a CVE came out for this OpenSSL version, this exact version, then I'm able to, or the product CERT team is they're able to identify under the dependency lookup, and I'll show you a picture in a moment, the dependency lookup, it'll show you different products so we can go directly to the team. In this case, the OpenSSL version, there's 2 known CVEs. And if I go to dependency lookup on this Log4j example, you'll see I was able to pick out the exact product that's using this version of the Log4j 2.220.0. And so in just a few moments, really, and we're able to export reports and things like that, I've now able to determine, in rapid fashion, where those different versions of products, and there could be in the software catalog, and it doesn't show in this screen capture, but there could be 4 versions of a product because maybe they release more often than once a year, that's in the catalog. So we would be able to identify, hey, in all these versions and catalog, you are using this version of OpenSSL and this version of Log4j. And so that's been critical for us to understand the footprint. And so what I wanted to talk about just for a second is that our suppliers are still learning how to generate SBOMs. So for our suppliers, we can scan their products and have an inventory, but anybody that we're bringing in new software components, if we don't have the source code for it, if it is a closed kind of object, then we're able to at least get that SBOM. But what we prefer to do is have the SBOM from the supplier and that it's been validated so that we can use it and leverage. But we personally, over this last 4 years, have over 4,000 SBOMs for these internal products that we're releasing. And that might mean that firmware is used on 20 different products, and that's very common. Right there, I may have 15,000 SKUs, but I have many products. And I've already talked about, it's definitely improved the speed, the awareness, and provided that transparency and trust to our customers so that they can also do searches in an event if they have systems, or even just do a search with a grep or something. They're able to find out. Now, there's still a lot of opportunities, is that our platforms right now, most of what I'm doing is scanning those binaries. There are some products that have a very different set of pipelines. Some are new, some are old, it's all just different all over the place. These platforms take so many different kinds of pipelines that getting the software bill of materials, which is much higher quality, out of the build process, we're just starting that journey. We've had a couple teams that have piloted and now are in production with their being able to generate their production level SBOMs to us, and they're tied into our Cybeats platform so that they're ingested immediately as part of the production build. But we have a long ways to go, especially with our large product set. So we're using, like in one team, Yocto, which is from an open source. So different kinds of platforms can generate SBOMs. The binary scanning tools do not necessarily pick up commercial products. They will notice and can identify .NET. They can notice and identify binaries, but they cannot identify things such as proprietary components that we have built, or even components that other companies that are not like a Microsoft or Oracle have produced. So if I'm buying a specific closed source library from a unique supplier like a graphics library, then I may not have the SBOM, and it may not be recognized in binary tools. And then many suppliers are hesitant or not prepared to give SBOMs. And I believe that is definitely in the case for those of you on the line trying to receive those in either the 2 main formats is difficult from them because they may not have the capabilities, or if you don't have a contractual reason or some contract clause, they may not be obligated to it, or the software may be from their upstream and they're not allowed to provide it. So we're still, there's a long ways to go in the SBOM journey. So at this time, I'm going to stop sharing, and I think I think we can definitely put the chat in the chat, my LinkedIn profile. You can reach out to me, and I'm happy to discuss further. I never get tired of talking about SBOMs, and so I will stop sharing and take any questions.
Thanks, Cassie, for the interesting information, the insightful presentation. We have a couple of questions, more than a couple, and let's start with the first one. I show it directly on stage. So the question is: do your suppliers give out their SBOMs easily, or is it a challenge to agree on?
Yeah,
on it?
great
Do you
question.
need some violence or whatever?
Yeah. So as I said near the end, I don't think it's ever easy at this point. People are first off afraid because it's what we say, in America, it's airing your dirty laundry, right? It's not perfect. There are products out there and libraries out there that may not be maintained. They may be end of life. It could be that you don't feel comfortable because that information is in there, or they feel it could be a roadmap to attacker, or some other reasons. And when this occurs, I have conversations with the suppliers. I'm like, I'm not going to grade your SBOM. We actually, when you import it through the Cybeats tool, it does give grading and that. And I say, we'll show you if there's issues. When we first started using this tool, actually some of the tools that generated SBOMs had errors. And so our supplier, Cybeats, was able to work with some of those other vendors to be able to improve it and do correct schemas. So we are still at that point where the majority are not wanting to give SBOMs. And I talk with people all around, they are experiencing the same thing. So it has to be a conversation about how you're going to secure it. Why are you using it? Is it mandatory that you provide it downstream? And this is all still very difficult. But as we get closer to the EU CRA and other pieces with the US government, and just globally other requirements like the UK and different places, software bill of materials will be just a mandatory item. And so getting those from your upstream, they'll receive that request more and more, and it will get easier. So it is hard right now.
Yeah. So people work on the relationship with your customers and your suppliers.
Yes.
So thanks for that. Let's show the next one. Do you track the relevance or usage of dependencies, brackets for triage purposes, within the SBOMs or separately?
Yeah. So at this point, that's not our main focus, the relevance and usage. As I was talking about right near the end, you could do a lot of improvements on products by actually looking at whether or not that component is needed, or if there's multiple versions. So I think when you tie it to also reachability, which, are you using all of that code in whatever it is, and or are you looking at the technical footprint and tech debt? That's part of it. And, are there parts that you can refactor? So at this point, our focus is more on being able to leverage it for the vulnerability management, but also from a standpoint of risk of the components themselves. Let's just say, for example, there's a lot of risk with OpenSSL and Log4j and some of those. So understanding our prevalence and usage of certain open source is what we are looking at. But as a whole scale level, we're not focused on that. I think from a maturity standpoint, that's where it needs to get to, but there's some big items that we're focusing on first.
Then the third question is, did you face challenges for naming and versioning properly software components?
Yes.
How easy
Yes.
is that?
It is hard. This is, I think, my first presentation I ever did with Dr. Alan Friedman from NTIA, and then now he's at CISA, talked about the software naming problem. It is still a problem, especially for those that do final, let's just say, proprietary components, but also closed, inner source, any of that. But then the final product itself, absolutely, it's a challenge. So when we're working with those pieces, especially I would be on calls and they'd be like, oh, you can use pearls and this and that. I'm like, this is finished goods. I mean, essentially it's Schneider Electric or whichever, and it can go by various names, right? So yes, we are running into it. There is, as part of I mentioned that project API for SBOM API called Project Koala or Transparency Exchange API. I just at last week's SBOM-arama in Denver, Colorado, there was a presentation by that group. And they mentioned something about the software and naming proprietary components that they're looking at potentially a model to help with that. But overall, as an industry, it's extremely difficult because you can't use, for example, CPE, the common product enumeration that is used as part of the NVD database, because they will only create CPEs for something that has a CVE, common vulnerability enumeration. So if you don't have a CVE, you can't create CPEs. It's sort of, it's unfortunately not a ways to go. So all of us who are releasing end products or have proprietary components, keep raising our hand and saying this is still a problem and we need to get it solved globally, and there's not an answer. So great question, and maybe in the next 5 years we'll have a good answer to it, but it is a large challenge we have right now.
Talking about conventions, there's another question in the same regard.
Okay.
Here. Is there a common format for SBOM that multiple suppliers and OEMs use? How is it handled?
Yes, there's two, Cyclone DX and SPDX. Cyclone DX is now becoming a standard. If you go to cyclonedx.org, it's now becoming a standard under, I forgot which standards organization, so I don't want to say the wrong one. But then SPDX is a standard that's sponsored by the Linux Foundation, and that truly is a standard under standard terms. And so you've got SPDX and Cyclone DX, and they have different schemas. They both can be available in JSON or XML format. Most people use JSON. So I ask suppliers and I ask customers and I ask all my different peers and people I know in the SBOM world, which one do you use or which one do you prefer? And it's about 50% SPDX and Cyclone DX. Fortunately for me, the platform that I'm using, Cybeats SBOM solution, can import either format and it can export either format. So I am not having to pick and choose. From a Cyclone DX, I find that it's stronger in regards to the work that they've done on certain parts of the format, especially the standard SBOM. They have an HBOM, a hardware bill of materials schema. They've got an ML bomb, a crypto bomb, and all of those. SPDX, I know some industries that are going straight to SPDX only, but then you have to have, there's something called protobomb that can convert and work with the both of them. So it'll still be a two standards race for a long time. I haven't seen one start to edge out. The Cyclone DX can make adjustments easier because they don't have to go through all the standards approval criteria. So the SPDX 3.0 version is in its last piece of approvals. And that means that there's so much, that's happening all the time. So for most of what we do internally, we leverage Cyclone DX.
So you push a little bit your partners. That's exactly the question here. Are you working with the suppliers to improve the SBOM capacities,
Yes.
and is there a push to make SBOMs data standardized and
Yes.
part of the expected delivery packages?
Yes. And once I have that API, it'll be much more important. But as a package, and even we don't do this yet, part of this platform, it has the ability where people can come in. And I want to make that easy for suppliers or using APIs. So, yes, I have had many conversations. We have a large supplier base. So, those that are providing a lot of product to us, I do have their SBOMs, especially if we brand label them. But from our, let's just say, even our IT standpoint, our IT side of the house has not started to require SBOMs because I need to set up another tenant and they need to tie it to their asset management because it doesn't really do them much good if they get an SBOM for version 1, but yet they've already updated all the product that's around. So let's say for a printer, it's auto updated to version 2, and then you have to go back and get version 2. So we have a long way to go in being able to automatically exchange SBOMs, and that's why I'm not trying to overburden suppliers, but I want to help them. So some of them, especially doing modern technologies, they're able to produce SBOMs real quick because it's part of easy, modern legacy, modern CI/CD pipelines. Older technologies, for that may not have the same kind of pipelines, it's harder for them to produce software bills of material, or they don't do that many builds. So we definitely are doing it that way. And from the data standardization, delivery is a way, but I don't see that being a common thing for another 3 to 4 years.
And maybe the last question for this session. What measures are you taking to keep vulnerability and exploitability information in SBOMs up to date?
All right. So
Fun one.
so this one's a little bit too long to go into, but the vulnerability exploitability exchange, we have that information in our security advisories, and we have the machine readable CSAF, customer security advisory format. I think that's what it is. It's in there just as, a few details. The journey to VEX, this next layer, is extremely difficult with the size and scale of products that I have. So from a SBOM standpoint, we're working toward having the VEX information available machine readable. However, the VEX information could change every 5 minutes. The SBOM is static to that release. So what I'm anticipating is that it would be basically an addendum, the VEX objects keep getting generated. But Log4j, my analysis is that if I had to release VEX objects, so a VEX answer for each one of those, 2 Log4j CVEs multiplied by all my different products, multiplied by all the different version numbers they ever had, it would have been 256,000 records. So you can see I'm having to think about this at scale so that we can manage it. So we have not included the vulnerability information in the SBOMs as of yet. It's only in the security advisories. All right. I think we're at time. Oh, I can't hear you, Sergey.
I totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
So thanks for letting me know. Thanks for the presentation. Thanks for the insightful questions. There are some left answered questions.
Okay.
And I would suggest that the ones who have questions follow Cassie into the lobby and have some private talk, some connect. You can connect, you can mingle. So go for it in the lobby. Cassie, thank
Great.
you very much.
Thank you.